Well, good morning. I'm Mark Mittelberg, and it is so good to be back at GCU. And man, that worship was awesome. Thank you guys. That was just great. I flew in from where I live in Denver yesterday with my wife Heidi. Wow, got a contingency here. Go Broncos, huh? My wife Heidi came with me. It's so great to have her here. And we are the proud parents of two seniors here at GCU. My daughter, Emma Jean, wave. And my son, Matthew, right there. And Matthew also leads a club here on campus called the Defenders Club. And and we're doing a special event tonight at 7:30. I'll give you the details at the very end. But we're going to continue, kind of do part two of what I'm doing this morning, tonight at that session at 7:30. And I hope you'll come back. We'll just jam that room, and we're going to have Q&A. And I'll mention it at the very end. I stand before you today fully convinced that Christianity is true. And I believe that you can be a confident Christian. That's why I wrote the book called Confident Faith. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about that. But truth is a tricky subject in our culture today. In fact, I want to start with a quote from Blaise Pascal, a 17th century mathematician and philosopher. He said this. He said, "Truth is so obscure in these times and falsehood so established that unless we love the truth, we cannot know it." That's a powerful truth. We need to love truth in order to even know what it is. And there's a verse, Zechariah 8:19 in the Old Testament, that says, "Therefore, love truth." So my plea today is that we will be not defenders of whatever we happen to believe or grow up with, but that we will decide to embrace and love truth wherever it leads. And I'm, again, fully convinced that it leads to Christianity. However, the culture doesn't seem to buy that, does it? A few years ago, a bunch of skeptics overseas in England decided to kind of inform the religious masses that have been deceived by religion and faith and so on. And so they realized those buses in London have the big sides on them. They thought, let's buy some signs and put them up on these buses in London to inform people about the truth about God. And let me show you a picture of what they put up. "There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life." Well, I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's based on truth. But that's more and more a message we're hearing in our culture. And not just overseas. When I moved to Colorado, I kind of thought, Colorado Springs, there's all kinds of ministries there. Everyone's kind of a Christian, right? Then I saw a billboard in Colorado Springs. Let's take a look at this. "God is an imaginary friend. Choose reality. It'll be better for all of us." From our good friends at the Colorado Coalition of Reason. Like that's based on reason. That's the culture we live in. And yet, again, truth is on our side. And what I want to do is start something that flows again out of this book, Confident Faith, where I present what I call 20 arrows of truth. And what they are is 20 arguments from science, philosophy, history, archaeology, things related to Scripture, experience, and so on, that show overwhelming evidence that Christianity is true. And what I'm going to do this morning is going to just delve into the first few of those arguments from science and from philosophy. And I hope this will reinforce your faith. But again, tonight we're going to talk more about history and things related to the Bible and other reasons we can be confident. But let's start with the first of these 20 arrows of truth. And I'll go ahead and put this first one up, which says, "Design in the universe points to an intelligent designer." And with each argument, what I'm going to do is put an arrow on this board. Because I think each of these truths points somewhere. And I'll draw the conclusion of where they point at the end. But let's just start with this first one. Design in the universe points to an intelligent designer. All the way back in 1802, there was a professor named William Paley who wrote a book called Natural Theology. And you may have heard his argument. It's kind of a classic argument. It's like you're walking along a path and you see something, you pick it up, it's a watch. He said, watches don't happen on their own. You don't pick up a watch and say, praise the cosmos. Look what time and chance threw together by accident, right? You know there's design in a watch. When you see a watch, you know there's got to be a watchmaker. And I think that's a good argument. And the argument is the universe and the things we see around us through the microscope, through the telescope, have design. They point to a designer. But a friend of mine, Cliff Knechtley, he says this. He says, if you have a watch, if you have one on, just look at your wristwatch. He said, if a watch needs a watchmaker, guess what? The wrist is far more complex than the watch. So if watches need watchmakers, wrists need wrist makers. And then let's go a step further. If you get a microscope out and you look at that wrist closely enough, you will see the cells in your wrist or really anywhere else in your body. And you know that they are far more complex than the wrist or the watch. Listen to this description of a cell from molecular biologist Michael Denton, an Australian scientist, who is not a Christian. Okay, so he's not arguing for the Bible here. He's just arguing from science. And he describes the cell. Now listen to this description. He says, to grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify a cell 1,000 million times until it's about 20 kilometers in diameter and resembles a giant airship large enough to cover a great city like London or New York, or I would say Phoenix. He says what we would then see would be an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. On the surface of the cell, we would see millions of openings, like the portholes of a vast spaceship. This is one cell in your body. Millions of openings, like the portholes of a vast spaceship, opening and closing to allow a continual stream of materials to flow in and out. And if we were to enter one of those openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity. And then I love the secular scientist raises this question. He says, is it really credible that random processes could have constructed a reality which is complex beyond our own creative capacities? A reality which is the very antithesis of chance, which excels in every sense anything ever produced by the intelligence of man? Could that have really happened by chance? Are you kidding me? He's saying the cell is like more complex than the space shuttle. These things don't happen on their own. If you think cells happen on your own, I don't have enough faith to go with you on that. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Watches need watchmakers, wrists need wrist makers, and cells need cell makers, and the list goes on. Let me go on to the second arrow or second argument, which says this. It's kind of a next step, kind of a cousin to the first argument. But this one says fine-tuning in the universe points to an intentional fine-tuner. Now again, this is design on steroids. This is stuff that William Paley, he could have only dreamt of this kind of information. This comes out of science in the last, 40 or 50 years primarily. Here's what they've discovered. There are about 50 different factors that had to be dialed into what has been called a razor's edge of precision in order for life to exist at all. For us to be here thinking about this, all 50 of these constants had to be perfectly dialed in. And someone described it as like 50 big dials in the sky. And again, everyone has to be to a razor's edge of precision. And you bump one with your elbow just a tiny bit and we're toast or frozen or something. But we can't exist if they're not all perfectly dialed in. It's so precise that Fred Hoyle, a non-Christian cosmologist, the guy that actually coined the term the Big Bang, He said this, he goes, when you look at that design, he said, it's almost as if someone was monkeying with the physics. I'm thinking, almost, huh? Maybe that's what happened. Maybe where you see monkeying going on, there's a monkeyer behind it. Someone dialed these things in. And because he did that lovingly, we can exist today. Now, let me describe one of these. Let's just take one of these dials in the sky, because each one of these are complex and amazing. But my buddy Lee Strobel, my ministry partner who wrote the book, The Case for Christ, when he was working on his book, The Case for a Creator, he was interviewing a scientist named Robin Collins. And he said to Collins, he said, okay, this fine-tuning thing is fascinating. Could you give us just one example and kind of put it in terms we can understand? So I want to quote from what Collins says. He says this, he says, there's no way you can really comprehend it. The fine-tuning, and by the way, the one he's talking about, the dial he's talking about is called the cosmological constant. This is the energy density of empty space. People give their entire lives to studying the energy density of empty space. God bless them. But anyway, here's what he says. He says, there's no way we can really comprehend it. The fine-tuning has conservatively been estimated to be at least 1 part. Now here's the ratio. Ready? 1 part in 100 million, billion, 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 billion. Because that would be a 10 followed by 53 zeros. The chances are 1 to 10 with 53 zeros behind it. And I love this. That's inconceivably precise. Duh. But then he gives an illustration of what the odds are of that one dial being dialed in as perfectly as it is so that we can exist. He says it would be like this. He says, let's say you were in outer space and you had a chance to throw 1 dart at a target on Earth from outer space. You following this? He goes, you get 1 shot, and the target you have to hit is a trillionth of an inch in diameter, which is less than the size of 1 solitary atom. The chances of you hitting a target that small from outer space with 1 shot, 1 dart, is about the odds of that one, constellological constant being dialed in the way it is, as perfectly as it is, for life to exist today. And that's just one. We've got 49 more dials to talk about. You believe that happened by chance? That these things just we got lucky, we got the lucky lottery number, and we got the universe that, listen, that takes too much faith. Where you see design, there's a designer. Where you see fine-tuning, there's a fine-tuner. There is someone behind the dials. Let me go on to the third arrow, or third argument, which says this: information encoded into DNA points to or indicates a divine encoder. Now here's another amazing, mind-blowing fact. In fact, before I talk about DNA, let me talk about information for a minute. Let's say you're down by the ocean somewhere, and you get up early in the morning, and you go walk along the beach, and maybe you see some ripples in the sand. And you go, ripples, maybe it's a beautiful pattern, but you can, kind of account for that through nature, right? Through wind and waves and so forth. But then you walk a little further down the path and you see something else. You see a heart shape. And there's an arrow going through the heart. And then inside the heart it says, John loves Mary. Now see, you don't look at that and go, wow, the wind and waves were really creative last night. That's awesome. No, you say, there's a mind behind that. Wherever there's information, there's an informer. And, this isn't a lot of information. It may not be a great mind. It may be, some wishful thinking, right? But there's someone behind this. Someone encoded that information. And even though it's a very simple message. So let's compare now. If that's information and needs an informer, let's talk about DNA. Francis Collins, the man who was the head of the Human Genome Project, the man who helped over decades and millions of dollars of research to finally map out the full information in DNA in the human being, in every cell of our bodies. finally did a press conference a number of years ago when Clinton was president. They did a press conference together. And President Clinton called what they had discovered through mapping out the human genetic code, he called it the language of God. What is in every cell of our bodies is information that is like the blueprint and instruction book for how our bodies work. For keeps track of all the movements of the cell I described earlier and so on. And in fact, Francis Collins describes the information in every one of the cells of every one of our bodies. Listen to this. This is amazing. This is mind-blowing stuff. He said the newly revealed text was 3 billion letters long, 3 billion letters long, and written in a strange and cryptographic 4-letter code. He said, such is the amazing complexity of the information carried within every cell of the human body that if you read it out loud, get this, you read that out loud, the information in one cell, day and night without any breaks, it will take you 31 years to read it. And then I love this too. He says, you decide to print it out on your printer, and you do standard size font and regular printer paper. You print out the information in one cell in your body. Guess how high the stack of paper is going to be? According to Francis Collins, he said it'll be the height of the Washington Monument. And I had to look that up. I had to know. That's 555 feet tall. That's like 55 stories high. That's how high the book of information is from one cell, the information in DNA in one cell of your body. So here's my question. If John loves Mary with a heart around it requires a mind, what kind of intelligence are we talking about? For the mind behind the information in DNA when he puts it in a 3 billion letter, 4-part cryptographic code that takes 31 years to read and is 55 stories high when you print it out. This is mind-blowing mind. That's our creator. That's the divine encoder. I don't have enough faith to believe that kind of information falls together by, time plus chance. It's incredible. A lot of people think science and religion are enemies. No, science and religion are friends, and they're pointing increasingly to the same reality of God. Let me give you one more scientific one. And this one, we'll go on to the next slide here. It says the origins of the universe point to a divine originator. This one is a 3-part syllogism or 3-part argument. First part is whatever has a beginning has a cause. Things don't pop into existence on their own. This science is built on this whole idea. Whatever has a beginning has a cause. Second part of the argument is the universe had a beginning. The universe had a beginning. And almost every physicist in the world subscribes to some version of the Big Bang. Right? That at a point somewhere in the finite past, probably billions of years ago, out of nothing, out of this infinitesimal point they call a singularity, boom, there was a universe. Now, some Christians get nervous. They go, I don't believe in a Big Bang. I believe in a creator. Well, do you think it might have made some noise when he created the heavens and the earth? I like what J.P. Moreland says. Wherever you have a Big Bang, there's got to be a Big Banger behind it. There's something behind. Big bangs don't happen on their own. So that's what J.P. Moreland says. I think it's a good argument. So the argument is whatever has a beginning has a cause. The universe had a beginning. Therefore, here's the conclusion. Therefore, the universe had a cause. And the cause of the universe can't be part of it. Therefore, it cannot be physical. So if it's not physical, I'd probably call it spiritual. By the way, it can't be part of time because, according to Stephen Hawking and other physicists, time came into existence with the Big Bang. So the cause of the universe is outside of time. I might call that eternal. It also had the power to create this universe out of nothing. I might call that omnipotence. had the wisdom in that nanosecond when the universe was exploding out of nothing to dial those 50 dials into place to the precise place they needed to be so we could exist. That's a lot of wisdom. You might call that omniscience. And I think it must be a loving being to make it all so we could be here to enjoy and talk about it today. Isn't it amazing how science and philosophy are increasingly pointing to the reality that sounds similar, very, very suspiciously similar, to the being we read about in the book of Genesis? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, some people hear these arguments, they go, it's philosophical stuff. Who's going to be convinced by this? Well, let me tell you, I have a friend named Dr. William Lane Craig, one of the greatest defenders of Christianity in the world. He has debated most of the world's leading skeptics and atheists and so on. He debated Christopher Hitchens, for example, the guy that wrote God is Not Great. He debated him at Biola University, and there was an atheist there that night who summed up the debate later. The atheist said that the Christian, William Lane Craig, spanked Christopher Hitchens like a foolish child. That's the atheist perspective. And one of his, he uses all these kinds of arguments, but one of his main arguments is this one. In fact, he did a PhD just on this argument. William Lane Craig did. But get this, I love this. He debates atheists all over the world. I've actually hosted 2 of his debates. He's brilliant. He wins all the time. There's whole atheist websites about how to try to debate him. Good luck. But a few years ago, he was going to the UK, and the Christians there said, he's coming to Oxford. Let's finally have the clash of the titans. Let's have a debate between William Lane Craig and Richard Dawkins, the guy that wrote The God Delusion, kind of the best-known atheist in the world. So they tried to line up. Guess what? Dawkins refuses to debate William Lane Craig, this big, bold atheist who will debate Christian actors and who will debate Christian bishops, will not debate a Christian apologist who can beat him. In fact, he gave a bunch of excuses. There's now, I love this, there's a website that is keeping track of the contradictory reasons Dawkins will not debate William Lane Craig. There's now like a dozen contradictory reasons why he won't debate him. But they decided to try again, and Dawkins refused again. So they said, well, you know what, we're going to set it up in the famous Sheldonian Theater in Oxford, like a debate, and if you don't come, he's just going to refute your book. Well, he refused again. They could tell he wasn't going to come. So they had an idea, and I love this. I think you'll get a kick out of it. They said, remember those buses where they bought the signs, the atheists, a few years ago? We could buy some signs too. And they did. Take a look. There's probably no Dawkins. So stop worrying and come to the Sheldonian Theater. And they had a great night. And you can watch William Lane Craig's presentation where he refutes Dawkins' book at the Sheldonian Theater. It's on YouTube. You can watch it for free on there. But I'm telling you, friends, these arguments are powerful. And I just have a very short amount of time to conclude. So let me tell you what, roll 2 slides forward. Go to the next one. I just want to make sure you know, tonight we're going to continue this discussion. Again, the Defenders Club, it's going to be in the North Lecture Hall. You get the number there. Come tonight at 7:30. No matter where you're at spiritually, if you have questions, objections, you think what I said is wrong, we're going to have a Q&A time. And bring your friends that have questions and doubts. And we're going to have a great time there tonight, 7:30. But let me just end. Look at this picture one more time. I have 16 more arrows to go through. And some of these are from history. The fact that Jesus came and fulfilled ancient prophecies. He lived a sinless life. He did miracles in front of skeptics. He died and rose from the dead. That's a big arrow. Skeptics like the Apostle Paul, who was an enemy of Christianity, their mind was changed when they saw the risen Christ. On. And I'm going to go through these quickly tonight and then do the Q&A afterwards. But what I want to end with is I want to say, you know what? This is forming a pattern. And what it's saying is truth is somewhere here in the middle. And the question is, what is that truth? The answer is not just the existence of God. but the existence of a God who became one of us, who came down to live among us, and then who spread out his arms to die for our sins. That's where good philosophy, history, science, on, as well as the scriptures, point to that truth. Would you pray with me? God, thank you for this group. Thank you for this school. Thank you, Lord, for truth. Thank you that it points to the true God and to Jesus Christ, and that our lives can be changed through knowing him, Lord. I pray that we would all embrace the truth, love the truth, and form a confident faith in Jesus Christ. Amen. God bless everyone.